What do we make of it? Is volatility is coming back. We'll have more spikes in volatility, but we're not going to go to this elevated period. It's just going to normalize. And what we're seeing is a reintroduction of the Fed. Last year, the Fed was a non-event. Even though they were in a tightening cycle, it was more or less a non-event. They were sucking, they were sucking volatility and risk out of the marketplace. Yeah. Now they're starting to reintroduce volatility.
I may be quoting you back to you, and if I am, forgive me. Somebody wrote recently, and it was really interesting, that markets test new Fed chairs, that the markets on average are down in the first 6 months of almost every new Fed chair's tenure going back through history. Do you think we're going to, quote, test the Fed?
I think we will test the Fed. So there's a couple things about the Fed. If you remember, when Greenspan first started, you had the '87 crash shortly after he started. That was kind of a big deal. Then you had Bernanke, who had to deal with the summer of '07. So a lot of the Fed chairmen, they do get tested. And this time, I don't think it'll be any different. But we're not expecting in the first 6 months of this year to see something that big. We think it's a second half story. Because in tightening cycles, what you generally see is a peaking of growth. You see a flattening of the yield curve, and you see multiples start to contract.
Have derivative? I don't want to get two options action. That's Friday at 5:30. So I'm not going to get too in the weeds.
Highly rated show.
But in terms of volatility, are derivatives books at some of the larger players set up in such a way that heightened volatility would be extraordinarily dangerous for them?
So I talk to our derivative desk all the time, talking about positioning and what people are doing. People are short volatility. So if you get a big spike up, but the spike has to be maintained for a period of time. You get one spike up, you'll get a lot of people where it's a sharp stick in the eye, but you won't get capitulation. You get a spike up and it stays that way, then people will have to rebalance.
Chris, if our viewers believe you, and they believe volatility is here to stay, or at least will go up, how do they make money off it?
There's a ton of ways to make money off of it. So what we're telling people mainly is you now have more ability to be tactical. You have more ability to trade around positions. For example, on Monday, we said we expected a market pullback of 2 to 3%. We got that in 2 days. Now you can start putting money to work. With regard to positions that you want to get into, you can be more selective. You can be more opportunistic. Tons of ways to do it.
Chris Harvey, Wells Fargo Securities. Chris, a real pleasure. Thanks for coming on Fast Money.
Great.
Guys, what do you think? Volatility, I mean, I hate to say volatility back with a 1% move, but that's kind of where we are right now. Well, right? I mean, 1% is the new 5%.
So listen, to Chris's point, I mean, the one thing that the Fed did in 2009 and 2010 with all of this was to suck that volatility out. And so that's what we've seen. We've had this nice, smooth up run. That is likely coming to an end in 2018. It doesn't mean the end of the world, but it does mean that you can be a bit more of a trader. So if you're a bit more of a trader, you're going to have a lot of fun this year. Just wait for the prices to come to you and be tactical, as they say.
Interest rates right now are, to me, extraordinarily accommodative. And so we have a Fed that's
even with the spike we've seen, because it's been pretty quick. I know we're not high, but it's been a pretty quick tick up to 2.78.
We have an economy that in the first quarter probably grew 3.5%. And if you think around the world, we've got a 60 basis point bund. They are so far behind the curve. When they move, it's also going to, it's global central banks. That's what, it's not just the Fed. It is more volatile.